Hari Hari, Rasamanda, we'll see you in France a few days' time. Huh? Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prestaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Nityananda. Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prestaya, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Nityananda. Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pracharine, Devasesha Sunyavadi, Askachari Sakarine. Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pracharine, Devasesha Sunyavadi, Askachare Shakarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaurabhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaurabhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Ram Ram. Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Gauranitai ki jai. Harinama Sankirtan ki. Brihat Madanga ki. Transcendental Book Distribution ki. World Holy Name Week ki jai. Go Premanandi. All glorious to the assembled devotees. All glorious to Sri Guru and Gauranga Bhattacharya. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale. Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswate Devi. Gauravani Pracharine Nevasesha Sanyavadi. Astachare Shatarine. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale. Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswate Devi. Gauravani Pracharine Nevasesha Sanyavadi. Astachare Shatarine. Vanchakalpaturubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. So welcome this morning, everybody. We're coming out of the ISKCON World Shravanam Week, and we're approaching the ISKCON World Holy Name Festival, which begins on the 17th of this month, which I guess, what day is it, Dave? I guess that's a Thursday, and it lasts 1 week through to the 23rd. So, of course, this year, in many places, the situation is a little different than most years, in as much as we've had various, let's say, impositions, maybe the word, or restrictions on our public engagement in Sankirtan this year due to the coronavirus. But the coronavirus still goes on. It may go on in different ways. Imperceptibly, the holy name is spreading in different means all over the world. And gradually people are getting infected. They're becoming positive. Showing positive signs of being infected by the coronavirus, much more than the coronavirus. So we just keep chanting wherever we are, whether you're in New Zealand or Fiji or Australia or Philippines or Malaysia or India or in Europe or in America or wherever, Russia, wherever you are, the coronavirus of Sankirtan continues to spread. No one can stop this Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We can ourselves, of course, let's say, go into some kind of hibernation for a while, but ultimately the Sankirtan movement goes on. So last week we've been concentrating on Shravanam, and today we're going on to Kirtanam, in the sense that we'll be carrying on in principle with our Chaitanya teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And it just so happens that the section we're on today is the Siksastakam prayers of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is very relevant to our, let's say, situation right now. In these Siksastakam prayers, Lord Chaitanya has has replaced all the basic necessities of the process of pure devotional service from beginning to end, right from the sadhana bhakti through to bhava bhakti, through to prema bhakti, and the various aspects of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, sambandha, abhideya, prayojanati, the knowledge, the foundation of our Krishna consciousness, the practice to awaken it, and the ultimate goal of our practice are all contained within these eight prayers, siksha meaning instructions, ashtaka, 8 instructions of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, which he himself relished. You can find these 8 prayers in the Caitanya Charitamrita in the Antya-lila chapter 20, if you want to. Not maybe today, but I mean, when you want, you can read there Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu's revealing these verses and relishing them himself. The basic foundation of our ISKCON or our Sankirtan movement contained within these 8 prayers. So today we'll be looking at a little bit, I'll see how we do. We'll be looking at the first verse of these 8 verses, beginning with Chaito Dharpana Marjana. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavindam Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavindam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavindam Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahojito Gurudaya Pushpavanto Chito Shamo Tamo Shado Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Shrupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakti Shaktikam Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Name Gauratishe Namaha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. Well, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in this world, as we're probably all aware, with several purposes. Primarily the internal purpose of fulfilling the desires of Srimati Radharani, tasting her ecstatic love for himself, this form of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu, feeling the mood of separation which Radharani experiences, the highest state of Mahabhav, of loving ecstasies. The Lord himself wished to experience this, which was previously unknown to him, you could say. And at the same time, perform congregational chanting of the holy names. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in this world for 2 purposes. The internal purpose, which we mentioned a little bit, and the external purpose of performing Sankirtan. So to taste Krishna Prema along with the congregational chanting of the holy names of Krishna. The Lord appeared in this world, and along with his associates, he spread Krishna consciousness or Krishna Prema through Sankirtan to even to the untouchables of this world, persons who have, practically speaking, no eligibility for Krishna consciousness. Thus, the Lord wove a wreath, like a garland, of the holy name and Krishna Prema with which he garlanded the entire material world. So this is the combination. The performance of congregational chanting is the methodology. Of course, there's a method of chanting, but the principle of awakening dormant love of Godhead or Krishna Prema. In this way, the Panchatattva danced and sang ecstatically in order to make it easier for the living entities to actually experience or enter into the 4 kinds of loving exchanges with the Lord, whether it's servitude or friendship or fraternity, parental or conjugal. This is the point of the Sankirtan movement, is to awaken this dormant relationship with Krishna. So we're going to, today, mainly we're going to focus on the first verse, I hope, of the Siksastakam prayers. And I haven't had time to share it with you as much as we should do, but we'll do what we can. And I can request Siksastakam Prabhu, if you can allow me to share the screen. I think that's possible, isn't it? This one here?
Yes.
We're hoping this works. I just have to swing it across. Is that right? Are we doing okay? I want to go on slideshow, play from current slide. I don't know if you can see it. I need some indication from somebody whether we can see this.
Yes, Maharaj.
Can, okay, thank you. Okay, so this is Sri Siksastakam of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. The Siksastakam prayers are the only recorded, you could say, unlimited words of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. But it's said that Lord Caitanya himself inscribed these 8 verses and he left them behind for the world. So that everyone in the world could get on board of this Prem Sankirtan movement. When Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu was in Jagannath Puri, and the first year when the Sankirtan parties from Bengal came to see him in Jagannath Puri, Advaita Charya and all the devotees that came from Bengal to see Caitanya Mahaprabhu, who was in Puri at the time, just before the Rath Yatra festival, after the Lord had traveled for several years in South India. He returned to Puri and the news spread to Bengal, and all the devotees eagerly wanted to come to see Lord Caitanya after many years. Haridas Thakur was one amongst them, Srivas Thakur. So many of all the great devotees, not all, there's unlimited, but so many of the great devotees from Bengal were there coming to Puri. And the king of Puri, Orissa at the time, King Prataparudra, was very eager to get Lord Chaitanya's darshan. So he was taken up on top of a tall building by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Gopinathacharya, his brother-in-law. And they were stood up on top of the tallest building, looking down as all the devotees were arriving from Bengal. And Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu was in complete ecstasy when they came. And so was the king. He couldn't believe his eyes seeing these devotees. He'd never seen devotees in such ecstasy before, dancing and chanting down the streets. And he couldn't see. The king said, he said, I've seen so many Sankirtan parties before, but I've never seen anything like this one. What is this kirtan party? He couldn't believe his eyes. And the vibration was so tumultuous, and the ecstatic, emotional feelings coming off of the devotees was beyond description, practically. So the king was completely astonished and astounded by this Sankirtan party coming down the street. And he asked, what is this? Who are these people? Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was not familiar with the devotees in Bengal. So Gopinathacharya, his brother-in-law, however, was familiar. So he started to describe all the devotees as they were coming. This one is Ramai, this one is Haridas, this one is Galakant, this one. All the different names of the devotees, Srivas Thakur, Advaitacharya, and so on and so on. And he said, well, what do they do? What is it? I mean, they're doing kirtan, but this is not ordinary kirtan. And then Gopinathacharya said, this is Prem Sankirtan. This is not Sankirtan of this world. This is Prema. This is the Sankirtan of the spiritual world, which is descended with Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, along with his associates, to give everyone the opportunity to associate with this Prem Sankirtan movement. And it's through the Siksastakam prayers, Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, you can say, is left like a hook or hooks by which we can take hold of and enter into the mood of Prem Sankirtan. And this is the mission of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. It's not just an institutional facilitating. It's actually a facilitating so that everybody can get connected to praying through Sankirtan. And Sankirtan is not just an external activity. It is the eternal constitutional nature of the soul. It is our Svadharma, our eternal nature, to be absorbed constantly in Sankirtan. So having the opportunity in this world to, maybe we're not so pure, but to associate with this Prem Sankirtan movement of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu is the greatest good fortune. And we should take advantage of it in any way we can. We have our japa, but japa is basically, at least by definition, is silent chanting. What we call japa is also audible, and it falls into the category, although we call it japa, but in reality it falls into the category of kirtan. And Sankirtan means when we're all together chanting. So practically speaking, that's why this is the Sankirtan movement. Chanting the holy names of the Lord audibly. Because this is the order of the acharyas. We don't concoct our own methodology. Some people may wish to do that, but that's not going to evoke necessary divine mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, mercy, Daya Shakti. It's not going to attract this. It's attractive when we please the Lord's confidential associates. So there's Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dancing next. I was going to do this during the kirtan. I completely forgot. So I'm just filling a little time here by showing some pictures of Sankirtan. And Lord Chaitanya would be in ecstasy dancing. This is the essence, you could say, of Sankirtan movement, is Rath Yatra, because Rath Yatra is the very activity itself of satisfying Radharani's inner desires to bring Krishna back to Vrindavan. The Rath Yatra, I don't know this year, in most places not much Rath Yatra festival. Externally it's going on, but the principle is there. But the devotee is always in this mood of wanting to bring Krishna back to Vrindavan. Not that he ever leaves, but the devotee has the feeling that he's not there. This feeling of separation is there. And Lord Srila Prabhupada himself demonstrated this in innumerable places wherever he went around the world, this feeling of separation, by encouraging and participating in Rath Yatra festivals. This one, I guess, is in San Francisco, I suppose, in America, somewhere in America. And Lord Chaitanya himself tasted this ecstasy day and night, areas in the night, on the beach, Jagannath Puri. He would just come out of the Gambhir where he was staying in the Gambhir, which is a room in the house of Kashi Mishra, and he would go. Somehow no one knew how he got out because the doors were locked and the doors were outside. Still, the Lord would sometimes be not in the room anymore, and there he was dancing, singing in ecstasy along the banks of he would consider it the banks of Jamuna, but along the seashore in Jagannath Puri. And again, here we are at the Rath Yatra festival, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You can read his ecstatic symptoms of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu if you want to read them in the Chaitanya Chaitanya. It's in Madhya Lila. I don't know the chapter number, but it's the chapter dealing with the Rath Yatra festival, the Veda Kirtan pastimes and the Rath Yatra pastimes, and how King Prataparudra he's also there witnessing these ecstatic symptoms, this ecstatic dancing of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. His dancing was, as you can see, was a painting, an old painting, but it depicts Lord Chaitanya in, well, immeasurably speaking, in ecstatic, emotional mood there, dancing during the Rath Yatra. And there is again, this is Varanasi, where the impersonal Mayavadi sannyasis are witnessing Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. What is this? It's sentimental behavior, so-called sannyasis. It's a very foolish behavior, but eventually they were also converted and they all became devotees chanting and dancing. And Srila Prabhupada he calls the whole world to chant and dance. Here he is in Bhaktivedanta Manor at the installation of Radha Gokulananda in August 1973. And he was in another world with his beloved lords, but spontaneously dancing in ecstasy, chanting it. And now when a pure devotee reveals or shares this ecstasy, it awakens that ecstasy in others, even if it's only for the time being. We may not be on the steady state of realization of relationship with Krishna rather than Krishna, but in the association of pure devotees, we get an opportunity to experience that and connect, at least for the time being. So now we'll go on to the verse which we're going to recite today, and we'd like everyone to chant as well if you wish to join us. Most of you are probably familiar with this Siksastakam prayers, so please join along. Cheto darpanamajanam Bhavamahadavagni Nivarpanam Shreya Kailava Chandrikat Vitaranam Vidyavadu Jivanam Anandam Bodhivardhanam Pratibadam Purnamita Svadanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. Once more. Cheto Darpanamajanam Bhavamahadavagni Nivarpanam Shreya Korava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadu Jivanam Anandam Bodhivardhanam Patipadam Purnamritashvadanam Sarvatmasnapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtan. Glory. Now this translation may be a little different to the one you're familiar with. Let's see. No, this is the one we are familiar with. We will be hearing the one from the Caitanya Charitamrita, which is the literal translation of Caitanya Mahaprabhu's prayer. But this is the one we're familiar with. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. In the Caitanya Charitamrita, just give me a second if I can find it, in the 20th chapter of the Caitanya Charitamrita, the translation is a little different. I don't have it on the screen, unfortunately. I thought I did, but I don't. I'll read it. This is in the chapter of the Anjalita 20 chapter, and it's text number 12. And there Srila Prabhupada translates this verse as follows. Let there be all victory for the chanting of the holy name of Lord Sri Krishna, which can cleanse the mirror of the heart and stop the miseries of the blazing fire of material existence. That chanting is the waxing moon that spreads the white lotus of good fortune for all living entities. It is the life and soul of all education. The chanting of the holy name of Krishna expands the blissful ocean of transcendental life. It gives a cooling effect to everyone and enables one to taste full nectar at every step. It's the same thing, but more literal, more graphic in some ways. Same basic translation. And this is spoken by Lord Caitanya. He's the relative verses in the association of Janananda and Sri Damodar, his two most confidential associates in Puri. And after establishing, before he spoke this verse, Caitanya Mahaprabhu established the preeminent and the supreme position of the Sankirtan movement. as the only means to awaken one's love of Godhead, particularly in this age of Kali. There's no other way other than chanting. And by this chanting, one can also become purified of all unwanted desires and awakening good fortune through living entity. It's interesting how these verses of the Siksastakam, and particularly this one specifically, relate to, say, for instance, the Nectar of Devotion, where we see in the first chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, chapter 1, there's other chapters before in the sense of introduction, officially the first chapter, the characteristics of pure devotional service are very akin to the characteristics of this first verse of the Siksastakam prayer. So it specifically establishes the Sambandha Jnana, or the means to practice. What's the foundation of our practice? What knowledge or what direction is it based on? So then we perform devotional activities every day to reach the goal of prayojana. So this is the foundational verse on the second verse. These verses are foundational verses on the path of pure devotional service. The Lord said, in this age of Kali, the process of worshipping Krishna is to perform sacrifice by chanting the holy name of the Lord. One who does so is certainly very intelligent, and he attains shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. It is intelligent. It doesn't seem like it. I was reading this morning, just so happens I was reading some, how one devotee came to Krishna consciousness movement. It was Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, actually. He first saw the devotees in Boston, in the USA, and he was himself a student at Princeton University in some degree, whatever, some high degree, and he thought the devotees were crazy. They were jumping up and down, these young boys and girls with shaved heads and funny bed sheets on, and just all day long just jumping up and down there in Boston. He thought they're either crazy or they got something unusual, but maybe they're intoxicated, but they look quite crazy, quite to the contrary of looking intelligent. Most people don't understand what real intelligence is. We think intelligence is the means of analyzing the phenomenal or the material world which we're presently absorbed in, but actually intelligence is the activity which releases us from this material world and connects us with Krishna. But that, of course, is unknown and even kept out of the circle of education in a modern day world for sure, quite to the contrary. But this is the Sankirtan movement, to provide that education which is sorely lacking in the world. Jiva Goswami writes, just give me a second because the screen is blocked by various things here. How to remove all these little things? Maybe I can move that. There we go. If I put it down there, that should be good. These ones, sometimes blocking and sometimes not. Oh dear. There we go. Okay, this is one of the problems when you're putting on a PowerPoint. If you're writing is to the edge, then you've got to be careful. Don't get too close to the edge in your Krishna consciousness. You can get swallowed by the material energy. You've got to stay in the heart, in the center. The heart is protected. Srila Jiva Goswami writes in the Bhakti Sandarbha and in the Krama Sandarbha. This is from the Sat Sandarbhas, these famous philosophical writings of Jiva Goswami, which capture the full gamut or the full range of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings in a very philosophical way, which is what his duty was. Ateva yajapyana bhakti kalo kartavya tada kitana bhakti samyoginaiva. This means that although it is required in Kali Yuga to practice the 8 limbs of devotional service, they have to be performed in conjunction with chanting. So that's maybe confusing to you, but actually it means there are 9 limbs. We have to practice the other 8 limbs, but in conjunction with the 9th limb, chanting. Chanting is the primary limb of the 9 limbs of devotional service. And Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, on several occasions when he was asked by the residents of Kulina Grama and others, this one and that one, of all the limbs of devotional service, of all methods of devotional service, which is the most important. And Lord Caitanya would consistently say the chanting of the holy name of Krishna is the most important activity. All other activities are meant to, you could say,
Hare Krishna, so it could be an internet problem with Maharaj, so we'll just wait a minute to see if he can come back.
back in again, and I hope we don't get cut again. So we're going to have to go back there where we were. Can you see this? Huh? Down here somewhere? Here somewhere? Down here somewhere? Here?
Yeah.
Okay, and where are we going here?
Yes.
Okay. We're not sure if you're seeing or not seeing. Are you seeing?
It's just coming.
Can you see?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And anyone else who's thumbed up there? I'll just get my screen cleared. There we go, we're back online again. Wow, gotta stay online. Gotta hold on to that lifeline which Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu has given us. Don't let go, even if it becomes dark. Sometimes in our lives it becomes dark, it looks like everything's blanked out. But just hold on to the chanting through thick and thin. Even when our screen goes blank, just keep chanting. Keep chanting. That's Lord Chaitanya's message. Nirantara Namalao. Always chant the holy name of Krishna. And that's the Siksastakam. At least this verse emphasizes this principle. So Darpana refers to the mirror, reflection in the mirror. Marjan, to clean that reflection of the heart, or the mirror. Clean the mirror of the heart. It's like a mirror. What we see in our consciousness, you can say it's the mind, but it's the consciousness which is aware of what's happening in the mind. Otherwise, it's like a television. There's no one to watch it. There's nothing to see. There's no record. There's nothing. It's a waste of time. There's no life there. So this consciousness is a symptom of life. So we're consciously aware of the pictures in our mind, we could say, whatever they may be. So the idea of the Sankirtan movement is to clean the pictures which we're conscious of. Right now, most of us have been, maybe not right this moment, of course, but in general in the material world, people are very much fully absorbed in watching pictures of various kinds of karmic activities, materialistic activities, which keep us bound up in this material world or keep us in this dreamlike state. So the process of Sankirtan is to replace those, let's say, perverted desires, those anarthas, those materialistic pictures which we're conscious of and constantly try to adjust to our liking. Even in our religious practice, we pray that the pictures may be adjusted to my liking, etc. But the Sankirtan moves of a different nature. It's to change the very nature of those pictures. The pictures actually can stay the same in our hearts, but they'll be seen in relationship with Krishna and not separately from Krishna. That's another, wonderful aspect of the Sankirtan movement. It's not a total negation of those pictures that we envision, but it's a connecting those pictures with Krishna. So we see everything in relationship with Krishna. So this is the cleansing process of the mirror of the heart. The contaminations that cover the mirror of consciousness are swept away by chanting the holy name, for it is the embodiment of profound spiritual bliss. And so it's, in that sense, it's not just some forced thing. Sometimes people are forced not sometimes, always, we're forced at school, we're forced by our parents, you could say, to think in a certain way and to accept certain so-called truths in the name of knowledge throughout our lives, and they become embedded in our consciousness, so we accept them as facts. Whether they are or not is another thing. We've been conditioned to believe what we read or see on the television or in the newspapers in many cases, etc. We're convinced of the knowledge we receive through our senses in terms of vision or hearing or tasting and touching and smelling and so on. That's another conviction. But all of these forms of acquiring knowledge are not infallible. They're all limited, imperfect, and they're not complete like that. Because we're seeing through this contaminated consciousness. That's the contaminations that cover the mirror of consciousness. When we say the mirror of consciousness, it's also a mirror, but it's actually that, in a sense, it's the consciousness seeing the mental state or the mind, which we generally accept as, you could say, our life or ourselves in some cases. So they're swept away. The contaminations are swept away, just like with a suitable broom, we can sweep away all the dirt in the room. They're swept away by chanting the holy name. It's not that the holy name is therefore a vacuum cleaner or a brush or something which we use and then we put it back in the cupboard. Because, well, even from the you could say the relative point of view, we can't do that anyway, because as long as one is in contact with this material world, there's no end of dirt. It's like rivers flowing into the ocean, dirty rivers flowing into the ocean. So we have to chant the holy name to constantly purify our consciousness while we're in contact with this material world. Now, that, of course, is not the ultimate prayojan goal of chanting, but it is one of the effects. There are 7 effects of chanting the holy name. This is the first one. The chanting of the holy name. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where's that book? Book on Siksastakam. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written a nice book, and I can't show you, it's too complicated for me to refer back to the screen, but he's given us a nice little book called Siksastakam initially. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj has also commented on this nice book called Siksastakam. And now we have the translation to English. So it helps us to enter deeper into this mood, step by step. Devotional service is a step-by-step process. It's not that we go to the end. In the beginning, we have to go through the stages of purification. We can do anything, and of course, complete surrender is not impossible in a moment. But generally speaking, we go through the stages, and it depends foundation-wise on association. Sankirtan means association. It is a Sankirtan, which is a Yuga Dharma. The congregational and complete engagement in Kirtan. This is the Yuga Dharma. So in this particular, let me just go to the first section we're on, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Let me go through it all, but just a few points to mention. The Jiva is infinitesimal. We're very tiny. Krishna is infinite. He's unlimited. But the Jiva is very infinitesimal and has a tendency. Krishna has unlimited energies. And amongst them, we have the external energy. We have the Bhariranga Shakti and Antanga Shakti. External and internal energies. We also have the Tatastha Shakti, the marginal energy. Jiva Shakti or Jiva energy, the energy of the living being is within or emanates from that Tatastha Shakti. We're marginal. With a propensity, we can be covered by by other energies because we're very tiny. It's like a spark of fire or a drop of water. We're very tiny. We have the same qualities as the origin, in the sense that everything, even all the energies come from Krishna. But the Tatastha Shakti is imbued or endowed with qualities similar to those of the Supreme Personality of God, the source of all energy, the Shakti Man. We're Shakti, Krishna's Shakti Man, or repository, the source of all energies. So we do have naturally some of those qualities, just like a spark of a ray of the sun, a ray of sunlight, has certain qualities of the sun in minute proportion. The heat and light are there in the rays of the sun, but in tiny portion of the sun's seemingly unlimited heat and light. So when that sunlight comes blocked, that little ray becomes blocked, then that sunlight is not manifested. The heat and the light doesn't manifest. We have a shadow instead of light and heat. We have a shadow. So in that sense, the jiva in this world is in a kind of a shadow state. There's very little, maybe a little bit, but not very much light, not very much heat emanating from the soul. Our consciousness is very dull. Through the consciousness, the heat, the light, or in the case of the Professor Shakti, that energy, that power is manifested. But most people are very dull. It's just reflected through the three modes of material nature. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says here, the jiva is infinitesimal, possessing a transcendental nature called pure ego. It's not that we don't have an ego, we do. The very ego means the identity of the living entity. Some people want to annihilate the ego. This is spiritual suicide. But actually we have our eternal ego. In the material world we have a hankara. That means false ego. It's a false ego. We identify ourselves with the material world, the material body. That's ignorance, that's anartha. And that's what this type of ignorance keeps us in the material world. But when the false ego is, when the false is removed, and the real ego remains, then when the soul can be situated in his own glory, you could say. So we have, by nature, pure ego, pure soul, and pure form. So the soul, the living being, the self is pure, consciousness is pure, and the natural form that the living entity assumes according to the heart's desire is also pure. But when he turns away from God and contemplates enjoying material energy, his pure nature becomes contaminated by nescience. Becomes contaminated. Just like maybe we say we have a mirror, let's give an example. It's not perfect because it's reflective, but we have a mirror in our bathroom or somewhere, and it's covered in, murky, dirty, kind of splashed, soapy water or something. You can't see properly. You're trying to shave or comb your hair or whatever you're doing there. And you can't see properly. It's all blurred. We have to clean it, and then we can see clearly. So the heart is like that. It's completely covered over by all kinds of dirty things, and there are varieties of dirty things. So in this case, it's considered our consciousness is contaminated because the consciousness is focused upon that dirty mind. So consequently, it's also by association described that consciousness is like the air which passes over various kinds of, subjects or objects rather, in terms of a very smelly place, whether it's pleasing or displeasing. The air picks up that particular fragrance according to its association. So the living entity through the means of consciousness picks up various types of concepts and various types of nature and so on and so forth, with which we identify ourselves. The jiva's pure consciousness, which is a function of his pure ego, manifests itself, as I guess it's when we become purified by rendering devotional service, then the jiva's pure consciousness, which is a function of his pure ego, manifests itself, and he sees the Supreme Lord. And also, not just the Supreme Lord, back to the earlier point of seeing everything in relation to Krishna, he sees himself in a sense, and time, the effects of time, and karma, and on material nature. These 5 features, you could say, of Bhagavad Gita, he sees them for what they really are, in relationship with Krishna. Mirror is his pure consciousness, he sees the reflection. In that, when that mirror becomes purified by the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, then in that mirror, mirror of his pure consciousness, he sees the reflection. It's a reflection of his original identity without any distortion. Everything we see has some kind of reflection to our original nature. It's just perverted. It's perverted in the material world by the modes of nature. But when we become purified by chanting the holy name, it's without distortion. So when we look in the mirror, there's no distorted reflection. We see it for what it is. If there's some defect in the mirror, we may be convinced, because that's all we see of ourselves, we may be convinced we look according to the distortion. We're convinced that we look like this or we look like that. So what we're seeing, the living entity is seeing himself as a human being or as a tiger or a man or a woman or black or white or something on the subtle plane. All kinds of identities are there, and we're seeing ourselves as these particular identities, this false ego. So when our heart sarvupadi vinimuktam tatparadvena nirma becomes cleansed by the chanting process, and we start to see ourselves in our real situation, in relationship to the material world, and in relationship with the spiritual, with the Supreme Lord, and so on and so forth. We start to see things as they are. The contaminations that cover the mirror of consciousness are swept away by chanting the holy name, for it is the embodiment of profound spiritual bliss. For example, Sri Rupa Goswami writes in this Namastakam, verse 7, and swept away, just like a tsunami sweeps everything away in the waves of the incoming ocean. It sweeps it all away. But it doesn't just sweep it away. The Sankirtan movement is is full of bliss. It's an ocean of bliss, which we'll hear in a minute. Oh. Here we go. Okay, this is in a Namastakam. Rupa Goswami wrote these 8 beautiful prayers, 8 prayers about Nam Tattva. This verse, actually the first verse we could say, embodies the nature of Nama Tattva, the truth about the name. So this is one prayer from Rupa Goswami's revelation, revealing to the world the nature of the holy name. Sudita Shita Janarti Rasaye. Goes on, just read the English because of time as well. O holy name, O Lord Krishna, you dissipate the sufferings of your surrendered devotees caused by their offenses to the holy name. That's a very interesting point. You dissipate the sufferings of your surrendered devotees caused by their offenses to the holy name. And it sounds, maybe you could say, a little bit contradictory, that when they surrendered, you'd think they wouldn't have any offenses. But that inattention, sometimes lingering doubts from the past, depending on our degree of surrender, it's associated with the material world around us. It's natural that sometimes some kind of conditionings may come up, or some doubts may come up, different things may come up. But Krishna's mercy, he dissipates these sufferings. Because the sufferings we experience are purposeful. They're not just, oh, why am I suffering? There's a reason behind it, to remove this tendency to commit offenses or remove the tendency to remain attached to the material world. Krishna sometimes arranges it so that it looks like it's some karmic thing, or it looks like it's a result of our devotional practices of some kind. But it's not. It's the hand of the Lord to help us to let go or to finish our material sufferings caused by offenses to the holy name. So if there was no suffering, or if there was no interference by the Lord at all, then what would be the incentive to not carry on committing offenses to the holy name? So the Lord, very kind with his devotees, that he, you could say, he makes sure they know you're not going to reach the goal if we carry on with an offensive mentality. You possess the transcendental form of ecstatic beauty and bliss. And he's talking about the holy name here. Usually we don't think of a name having form, but on the spiritual platform, Nam and Rupa, name and form, are one and the same. They're just manifested apparently differently according to the perception of the receiver. And the name is more accessible, at least more accessible from the point of view of a conditioned soul, that's for sure. But it's by taking shelter of the holy name that the name reveals its form. Krishna reveals his form. And you appear as the embodiment of sublime joy for the residents of Gokul. It's not just the conditioned souls. it's not like a stepping stone towards Krishna consciousness. The chanting of the holy name is Krishna consciousness, is Krishna in full. So even the residents of Gokula are embracing the nectarian association of Nam, of the holy name, Krishna himself, in this form, the embodiment of sublime joy, that they get ever-increasing happiness associating with the name Krishna. You are therefore a fully spiritual entity of the same spiritual nature as the Vaikuntha planets, as everything in the material world is made of Chit Shakti, or spiritual energy. The holy name is the embodiment of complete spiritual Shakti. It's not just a Shakti, it's Shakti Man. It's the source of all energies. The name is the source of all energies, made of the same transcendental substance, spiritual Chit Shakti. I offer my repeated obeisances unto you. So this again, offering our obeisances unto the holy name. we sort of think of it as something we do to achieve something. It's not. It's our opportunity to associate with Krishna. We should be constantly offering our obeisances to the holy name. I think we're not on that platform. We're still struggling to try to even approach the holy name. We get very confused if we try to do everything at once, but we get the understanding that this is the actual situation. The holy name is Krishna, and if Krishna were to appear in our room right now in a way we could actually perceive him, I'm sure that every one of you are wonderful devotees. You would certainly offer your obeisances to the Lord again and again. And hopefully we're not like Hiranyakashipu or Ravana or something, or Shishupal, not that type of mentality. They saw the Lord also, but they didn't offer their obeisances. They offered blasphemy or challenge or whatever, something like that. Anger. And okay, we go on to the second section. So the first line, Chaitodharpana Marjanam, is to cleanse that mirror of our consciousness, so that we're not all the time associating with dirty thoughts, with dirty intentions, so many things. We start to associate in our consciousness with deities and pictures of Krishna, with verses about Krishna, with the holy name, with remembrances of devotional activities and devotees, etc. The second line is part number 2. So the first one, 7 effects of this chanting, congregational chanting. Bhava Mahadavagni Nivarpanam, material existence, the blazing fire, Mahadavagni. We sing in the morning, Samsara Dava, Nalalita Loka, this forest of material existence, the blazing forest fire, Nirvapanam, it extinguishes it, puts it out. It's not possible to put out a forest fire. Now there are many fires in the United States and in South America, in the Amazon, big forest fires. The fire engines cannot put them out. They may go out on their own accord because they're material, but the actual effect or the method of extinguishing them is there has to be a rain cloud, powerful rain cloud, which just extinguishes it. You cannot extinguish it with beating on it with some brooms or throwing some ashes or sand or pouring a few buckets of water or something. It won't work. It's only by the will of the Lord when it's extinguished. So this Sankirtan movement is like that. It's a great unlimited rain cloud with no limit to its capacity. It stops the miseries of the blazing fire of material existence. So we see this in the sense of surrendering. This Kleshagni, the main word is here, fire, Agni, Klesha. Kleshagni, the removal of or extinguishing of the fire, Agni, blazing fire. The great blazing fire, forest fire, Dava Agni, Davagni. It removes that great forest fire, the Sankirtan movement, extinguish it. And we see in Nectar devotion is Kleshagni. This is one of the characteristics of pure devotional service. It doesn't just remove the effects. Like a forest fire, of course, it burns things down to the ground, another aspect of it. But it also, the problem is the roots are still in the ground and it grows up again. But the blazing fire of Sankirtan removes the forest fire of material existence to such an extent, right down to the roots, as Rupa Goswami explains in the Nectar of Instruction, right down to the roots, this disease can be removed out of the heart. Now, removal of suffering or the forest fire of material existence is not just the effects, but the causes. So Krishna, in the form of the holy name, he removes the very causes which cause us to become entangled or attached or desiring to see material pictures in our consciousness all the time. It's one thing to remove the pictures in the mind, and people do this by prayaschitta or this or that. They try to remove the effects, but or just remove them. But unless it's replaced with something else, the tendency is it will come back in again. The same dirty things will come back in again. You have to fill it up with something else. So the consciousness has to be filled with subjects related to Krishna, with Krishna Katha. We're thinking about Krishna, chanting Krishna's names, bhajans, etc., absorption in service to the deities, different things which protect us, and especially the holy name. Keep chanting, helps us to protect us to again become overwhelmed by the material energy in its various covering forms, be it the false ego, be it ignorance, be it the false identity with objects as being mine, be it greed and desire to obtain more and more and exploit others, see others as objects of my pleasure, whatever type of covering it may be. To go on and on with different types of coverings. But basically speaking, we have to cover ourselves in such a way that we won't become, our consciousness will not be pervaded by these other forms of illusory or perverted objects, you could say. By covering ourselves, by always chanting the holy name of Krishna, protecting ourselves. It's stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, so stopping the blazing fire means removing the very desire or the cause behind the effect, which is our desire to enjoy this material world separately from Krishna. It is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam by Sukadeva Goswami, Natak param karmam nibandhakintanam mumokshatam tirtapadanu kirtanat nayat punah karma susajate mano ajastamo kalilam tatonyata. Therefore, one who desires freedom from material bondage should adopt the process of chanting and glorifying the name, fame, form, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at whose feet all the holy places stand. One cannot derive the proper benefit from other methods, such as pious atonement, speculative knowledge, and meditation in mystic yoga. Because even after following such methods, one takes the fruit of activities again, unable to control his mind, which is contaminated by the base qualities of nature, namely passion and ignorance. This illustrates what we were just mentioning, basically speaking, association. As long as we're associated in this material world, this contaminated material world, which is pervaded by passion and ignorance, any other method of trying to rectify or counter the effects of passion and ignorance is not successful. It will not be successful because ultimately it rests upon Krishna. Everything rests upon the Supreme Lord. So we have to rest upon the Supreme Lord too. We take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like a person who's in prison takes shelter of the king or the leader of the government, they can easily release them from the prison. No matter what you do, if you don't have the favor of the king or the ruler or the authority, we cannot get released from that situation. So that's a nice verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. And I'll just mention one or two things which Bhakti Vinod Thakur describes about this forest fire, blazing forest fire, which is extinguished by the Sankirtan. This blazing forest fire is within our heart. Now, there's another type of forest fire, this is not mentioned by Bhakti Vinod, but there's another forest fire called Anuttapa. Anuttapa is a result of our, let's say, realizing our fallen condition, realizing our sinful activities, and becoming a very repentful mentality. It's also an aspect of this, taking it a little further. It's called and you feel in your heart a repentance, a feeling of, you could say, very sorry that we performed all these various activities. Not just sorry. It's complete. It's a pervasive feeling of how foolish I've been. I've wasted my life in this universe, lifetime after lifetime, pursuing fruitless material objects. And now one's coming to one's senses, but one feels very repentant that one has turned, or let's say endeavored separately from Krishna. And this feels like it's almost like a burning feeling in itself. Anutapa, tapa means suffering. It's another kind of suffering within the heart, which cleanses the heart, is a part of this cleanse. One of the emotional effects of purification when we chant the holy names is that we will feel this anutapa, this feeling of, it's not just having a good time chanting Hare Krishna. That's great in the beginning, but the effect should be that we start to have a little bit more sambandha gyan, a little bit more realization what actually it means to take shelter of the holy name. It's not just something that feels good. And when it doesn't feel good, I don't do it. It's not like that. Or something we go to because there's some nice people there, or whatever, nice tunes or something. That's okay in the beginning, but that's not Sankirtan. It's a state of consciousness. Step by step, that consciousness becomes clarified, becomes open to certain emotional experiences, realizations develop. So this, you could say, is one in relationship to our previous experiences, material experiences we may have. Anutapa, that we feel remorse, complete remorse for our foolish behavior, whether it's challenging, doubting, indulging, animosity, greediness, anger, whatever it may be, envy of others, so on and on. You can go lusting over things. The madness that we've identified with over lifetime after lifetime. So this Mahadavagni, which we see in this verse, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, a raging conflagration that cannot be extinguished by any means other than the congregational chanting Krishna's holy names. And some of you are from Australia. You may have had some close experience with massive forest fires earlier this year, which were uncontrollable, basically. It was only when the rains came that they were able to extinguish, or if there's no more wood to burn or something. Material wood is like that. It's a flagration all over, everywhere. It's a blazing fire. It may be mode of goodness fire or mode of ignorance fire. It's burning everywhere. So anyway, that's just a little something. We're not getting very far here. We're on the second, 7 points, and it's already 11:20. I'll do one more, and we'll carry on with the others next time, because this is a good theme, because now we're going into World Holy Name Festival. So this is definitely related to World Holy Name Festival, because a real festival is not one of perverted nature, which is based upon how I feel, but it is a festival which is meant to bring pleasure to Krishna's senses. The Siksastakam, Lord Caitanya has revealed the Siksastakam to us, so we can actually start to, let's say, awaken and start thinking, I exist. My Svadharma is to exist for the pleasure of Krishna. And that is Siksastakam. Instructions, 8 instructions or guidelines, so we can come to this point of only wanting the pleasure of Krishna. In the third line, Chandika Vitaranam. It's funny when you break it down, it sounds different. Shreya, and you have Shreya and Preya, so most of you are familiar. Good fortune, good Shreya activities which are long-term beneficial. Karyava. Sometimes that means white lotus, and Prabhupada has translated it as white lotus in the Caitanya Charitamrita, but normally it means lily. Either way, it is a particular special plant, lilies, lotuses, like that. Chandra, Chandrika, the moonshine, Vitaranam, spreading everywhere. So the moonshine, spreading that cooling moonshine everywhere. Moonshine of good fortune. The chanting is the waxing or the rising moon that spreads the white lotus of good fortune for all living entities. Not just humans, every living entity gets the benefit of this Sankirtan movement, which is like the waxing moon, the rising moon, that spreads the white lotus of good fortune for all living entities. This is really good fortune. People may not see it like that. They may even be upset when they hear the Sanktam party coming sometimes. They run away, or they call someone to get rid of us, or they try to get rid of us, whatever it may be, or they block their ears. They're not. We feel they've had the chance for good fortune, but they don't really want it. And even we, as aspiring, whatever we are, aspiring sadhakas, or whatever you wish to call it, we oftentimes are not that. We're different, but we have the same mentality sometimes. In terms of the chanting is going on, and we're looking in the window, we're reading something else, we're sending text messages, we're thinking of something else, etc., etc. Well, the waxing moon of the Sankirtan, which is spreading the white lotus of good fortune to all living entities, is there. But we've closed our windows, or we're running away, turned our back on it, plugged our ears and eyes. We're not experiencing the beneficial effects of that waxing moon of good fortune, which is our misfortune. Even though we're in the presence of the moon, we don't take advantage of the moon's cooling rays or its purifying rays. And thus, the lotus of our devotional service, this is an example here, does not open. When the lotus, maybe the bud is closed, we're in the closed stage right now, but now if we stay in the association of the Sankirtan, then we can come to what's called the budding stage, where that lotus gradually opens up, and the petals of the lotus start to open up, and it looks very, very beautiful. So we should be in that stage. The more we stay in the presence of the waxing moon of the Sankirtan movement, the more good fortune shines upon us. Then the closed heart, the heart which is by nature imbued with prema, is presently not manifesting prema, manifesting some perversions, but gradually opens up. It starts to bud in the association of Sankirtan. The Skanda Purana, and I'm quoting Hari Bhakti the last, is a nice verse. The holy name of Krishna is the highest benediction above any other benediction. It is sweeter than the sweetest honey, the eternal fruit of transcendental knowledge of the tree of the entire scriptures. Is the eternal, lovely verse, is eternal fruit of transcendental knowledge. It's not just knowledge that takes us to another stage, it's eternal fruit of the tree of the entire scriptures, not just one. It's the fruit of all scriptures. It's the fruit of all knowledge, as we'll hear next time. O best of the Bhargavas, if anyone chants Lord Krishna's name just once without offense, whether he chants with faith or indifferently, the holy name immediately liberates him. Once without offense. Because we can be liberated. Liberation sometimes means just freedom from reaction. It doesn't mean entering into Brahman. It certainly doesn't necessarily infer entering into one's constitutional position in the spiritual realm. It may mean many things. Liberate one from suffering, liberate one from karma, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, pure chanting of the holy name Shuddhanam awakens our relationship with Krishna, and our attraction actually grows as we continue to associate with the Lord in his Namarupa, and our natural attraction for Krishna's form, pastimes, etc. will develop. But right now we're trying to cultivate this service, this respect, offering our obeisances to the holy name, serving the holy name in this way by spreading the holy name, by chanting the holy name as much as we can, by trying to hear the holy name with our consciousness, our awareness, as much as we can. Holy name is the highest benediction. Nothing else in this material world can compare with the name, because everything else may benefit one materially in terms of a better material situation, may free one from karma, may even liberate one from this material world, but it doesn't bestow love of Godhead. Prema Sankirtan, Golokara Prema Dana Harinama Sankirtan, which has come from that spiritual abode, has come into this world to give us this opportunity. We just have to take shelter, hold on to the Sankirtan, and this is the means of let's say, coming out of this dreamlike illusion, out of the grips of Maya, and in the shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. We have no longer the fear anything of this world. Okay, I'm just going to read a little comment on that. Well, that would be Shubhada, we see in the Nectar of Devotion, called Shubhada, brings about all good fortune. These are symptoms or characteristics of pure devotion service, which manifest by the cultivation of pure chanting or offenseless chanting of the holy name of Krishna. This is the primary means whereby pure devotion service is performed. So back to Vinod, the benediction here is compared with the flowering of a cluster of pristine, beautiful, very, immaculate white lotuses. For just as the moon's soothing rays cause the white lotuses to blossom, the rays of the mellow taste of chanting the holy names resuscitate the languishing petals of the lotus of benediction for the jiva. And we're angry. We're just not getting it in this material world. We're trying. We're coming into the contact of something which we think is going to make our hearts blossom, it's going to satisfy all of our desires. And we get disappointed again and again. Business, beautiful people, music, whatever we're into, whatever is around us, fantastic, enjoying a beautiful holiday. It's like right now, millions of English people have gone for their holiday in Spain and Portugal, and then suddenly overnight they're told, if you don't come back by midnight tomorrow night, you're going to have to go into quarantine for 14 days. And people, oh my God, all holiday is ruined. We thought this is it. Lying on a beautiful beach in some Faro or something in South Portugal. So nice, beautiful waters, warm, and suddenly, boom, you've got to pay £1,000 to get a ticket back to London or something. Otherwise, you've got to quarantine for 14 days. And people's lives are ruined. Not ruined entirely, but their idea of getting this satisfaction is ruined. And it happens with just about everything that we do in this world. Literally everything, because everything is temporary. But the Sankirtan is eternal. It's eternal. And it doesn't just have a temporary effect like at night with that moon. I'm going to go back to, I don't know what I'm going back to. How do I do that now? Where do I go? I want to go back on the screen to go back, if you know what I mean, to my picture on the screen. What does that mean? How do I do that? Where do I go? How do I do that? Oh, I'm finished here. How do I go back to the normal screen? Where do I go? I don't know what happened.
Is it on the top, Maharaj?
Oh, there it is. Stop here. You got it.
Right.
I don't know if we're back again or not. Are we?
Yeah.
We are. Fantastic. Wow. Great to see you. You're still there. And wake up. Everybody wake up. If you're sleeping. Wake up, sleeping souls. This is bathe yourself in the ocean. And we'll hear that next time. The unlimited ocean of Sankirtan. Unlimited ocean. This is the mercy in the material world. It's like little pools, little tiny ponds, which dry up very easily. The Sankirtan movement never dries up. We may dry up, but the Sankirtan doesn't. It carries on eternally, ever increasing, ever increasing. So let us take advantage of that. Cheto Darpana Majna, Bhava Mahadevagni Nirapana. This is all we've got today, isn't it? Shaya Kurava Chandrakavataram. We've only got that far. So that the lotus of our heart is opening up to pure devotional service in the performance of Sankirtan. As the heart becomes cleansed, then naturally things become clear and clarified more and more and more. All of our problems are due to this contaminated heart, due to offenses, as we just heard. Hare Krishna, secret of Sankirtan. Secret of Sankirtan, all contained within the Siksastakam prayers. So I'll finish the little endeavors there. And without well, we'll read the questions. I will read one or two more things. well. This is from Bhakti Siddhanta. So if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat if you can. Yeah. Chanting Lord Krishna's name, Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj says, cleanses the mirror of the conditioned soul's polluted heart, which is wholly covered by three contaminations, namely material desire, the enjoying spirit. The material desire is the enjoying spirit, which is, you could say, a tendency to enjoy, which manifests within various material desires and ungodly atheistic activities, or in other words, aversion towards Krishna. The most effective process to cleanse the jiva's heart of all these impurities is chanting Lord Krishna's names. These treacherous, nice heavy word, treacherous, so something that's treacherous is almost beyond one's ability to overcome. It's treacherous rivers and rapids or something. It's very hard to overcome. The treacherous contaminations cover the mirror of consciousness and cause the jiva to reject his true nature. When we come into this material world, this is Maya's business, it covers us with these two things: to identify with the material world, to identify oneself as being this body, and to identify with this material as being mine, me and mine, these two conditionings which Maya imposes upon the living entity. Let's see. So the holy name can also, Sankirtan can protect us, as we were hearing earlier on. And when Lord Krishna's name is perfectly chanted, because we're not perfectly chanting it, it's a cultivation. This is the process of Abhideya. The devotees are protected from these scorching flames. They may, just like Prahlad Maharaj, how much more can you, example you want to give? I mean, Prahlad Maharaj was, and Haridas Thakur was also Prahlad Maharaj manifesting through him at that time. How they show this by example, completely protected from all kinds of tortures, poisons, and so many things, because they're completely taking shelter of the holy name. They weren't asking for protection. Krishna or the holy name automatically protected them from all kinds of challenges and dangers. But the real danger is not necessarily being burned by fire, moistened by, drowned in the ocean or something, caught up in some disease, which many devotees have been. The real protection is to protect our consciousness so that we don't become victimized by Maya. We don't start to identify ourselves. This is me, this body and mind is me, and this is mine, and so on. This, and then everything else that comes from that, all other kinds of desires, hankerings, etc., which come from that false identification, that we be protected from that by cultivating pure chanting of the holy names. Protected. Even though they are in the midst of the forest, so one can be protected, even in the midst, just like Krishna, when he was there in the forest with his cowherd boys in Bandiraban, and also not far away from when the Kaliya serpent pastime took place also. That they had big forest fire. In the middle of the fire, Krishna protected him. He just swallowed up the forest fire in one gulp. Or some they say he took it in his hand. But he removed the forest fire. So Krishna can remove this seemingly insurmountable forest fire which is burning us and causing so much pain in our hearts. He can remove it just like that if we take shelter purely of his form, his Namarup. Krishna's name blesses all with the greatest prosperity. I mean, material world, all of our wealth, all of our beauty, all of our knowledge, all of our strength, fame, enunciation. What is the use of it all? It's all here 1 minute and gone the next. Just fame amongst the infamous, wealthy amongst poverty-stricken people, beautiful amongst ugly people, knowledgeable amongst fools, strong amongst weaklings. What is the meaning of it? It has no meaning. It has no meaning. Renounced amongst attached. What does it mean? It has no real, it's just a relative perspective. But the real perspective, the absolute perspective, that is the Sankirtan movement, which is the highest benediction, the highest good fortune, where it takes shelter because it's eternal and opens up the gateway, opens up the heart to our Svadharma, our real nature, not our reflected, dirty nature in this world, but our real nature. The more we see that pure reflection in the heart, the more we identify ourselves with purity, or with our Swadharma, our eternal nature, or identify ourselves with Krishna, etc., as he appears in various forms to give us this opportunity. Okay, so we have a few questions up on I think we do. Anyway. Let me just open the chat a minute. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. What is the significance of the holy name referred to as the waxing moon? Please kindly elaborate. Beautiful. Well, the waxing moon means the rising moon, the moon which is ever increasing in its waning, going down, waxing, coming up. You can say waxing, we take it in terms of the cycles of the moon, where it goes from a dark moon night to a full moon night. So that period is where the moon is waxing. So as we continue to cultivate the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, it's like that gradually that moon of good fortune is rising stronger and stronger. Its beams, its cooling effect are increasing more and more and more and more up until, of course it's a material example, but it's the idea. The moon does go up and it goes down, as in the material, everything does. But in this example, it just means the ever increasing. It never stops. It's not like that's it. The waxing moon of this Sankirtan movement ever increases. It's always waxing. Bigger and bigger, more and more. Opening more and more and more. It's not like that's it. It's a living entity possessed of similar characteristics of Krishna is ever ecstatic. The ecstatic emotions are ever increasing. The love of the living entity is ever increasing in relation with Krishna. And something which we would love to experience in this material, and we certainly endeavor to do so. But the effects of time cause cessation of that endeavor. The desire remains, but the particular endeavor is curtailed by the effects of time. Whereas on the spiritual path, if we cultivate chanting the holy name purely, without offense, it's never ending, it's ever increasing, ever opening. It's not like a mundane flower which blossoms fast, stays for a while, and then boom, falls down again. It's ever blossoming, ever opening, ever increasing. So the more we stay in the presence of the pure holy name, then the effect will be like that. It will be ever expanding, ever increasing, like the waxing moon forevermore. Next one. On the topic of offense, less chanting. Sometimes we are chanting and overlooking some activities happening in the background, such as boiling the milk or making kheer. Is this offensive chanting? I see. Overlooking means we're also keeping an eye on things. It doesn't mean when overlooking means we can also, it can mean two things. English is funny. It can mean taking care of it, or it can mean ignoring it. Depends which way we look at it. I overlooked it. Or it can mean we're looking over it. Interesting. We've got to know the context. So in this context, we're referring to keeping an eye on it. Well, in principle, any chanting is good. Whatever we're doing, Jiva Goswami has recommended we should chant Hare Krishna. That will help, and we'll hear more about that maybe next time or one after, I don't know, down the line somewhere, about the importance, as we've heard about these types of ignorance, our hankering, our material desires, and false ego, or ignorance of identity. We've heard about these. It helps to protect the living entity to become a victim of these coverings of the heart. When, according to Jiva Goswami, we chant the holy name as we're engaging in other activities. So what entails offensive chanting is another interesting thing. It depends on the time and circumstance. Now, if we're chanting japa, just like if you're cooking, and you're talking of a multitasking situation here, but the best thing is when we're chanting japa is to put all of our attention into that particular service to Krishna. In emergency, in time, place, and circumstances, then sometimes that may not be always possible for whatever reason, but we should make all endeavor to make it possible. So we put all our attention in chanting japa. When we're cooking, we should be putting all our attention into cooking. Of course, sometimes other things have to be done. Mother with a baby and this and that. But in principle, we should focus. That is our service to Krishna. But while we're cooking, we chant. Now, that is certainly not offensive to chant. In fact, it's recommended to chant. It may not be the same attention we're putting into chanting as we are when we're doing japa. However, we should be putting our attention to driving our car when we're driving fully. But that doesn't mean that we can't chant at the same time. We can't concentrate on japa. Japa particularly is attention. This is the effect of chanting japa is specifically the more that we put our attention into the sound of the name, the more that particular service will bear fruit. Japa. But Sankirtan, this is why Sankirtan is the all-pervasive, all-beneficial activity, can go on in any situation. It is always beneficial, it's always auspicious, always brings good fortune. Now, back to offense. Now, offense is an interesting one. We're not only referring to the 10 offenses which we hear about here. Amongst those is inattention. So you could definitely say, if your mind's thinking of the kheer or the milk, you're being inattentive. So you could say, in chanting japa, that would be inattention. In kirtan is not. It doesn't come out. In the spiritual, it said the residents of the Goloka are always engaged in various activities, but they're simultaneously singing the glories of Krishna. It's not offensive by any means whatsoever, because they have no ulterior motive in their chanting other than to be Krishna conscious. It's not offensive. It's not offensive. But if we're asked to do one thing, we're doing another, that is on the border, that is offensive. But if we're just chanting with no ulterior motive, it's not an offense. In fact, it's the opposite. It's beneficial. But the real offensive chanting is when we are chanting with the intention of getting some material return. I'm chanting because I want something material. I want to get free of suffering. I want to cure someone's health. I want to pass my exams. I want to go to heaven. I want to, whatever, get money. I want to be famous. I want to be, whatever, some material motivation. And even more offensive is the mentality, I'm chanting so that I can merge into the Brahman, or I can become God, or something like that. These are the two main categories. So that is not so much of a specific time. It's a nature, an offensive nature that the person has. That is the real block on our devotional service. That is the real block. And you can be cooking, you can be cleaning, you can be doing daily worship, you can be chanting japa, you can be doing anything we like. With that type of mentality, we're still offensive. Although you're doing your service really well, you're actually doing it with offensive attitude. And that's the real point. Not so much, oh, that's offensive, Prabhu, we didn't do your ashram properly before we went on the altar. It may not be offensive at all. In fact, to correct something, that may be offensive, is the attitude which counts. The genuine attitude. The genuine attitude will always be, I want to do it for Krishna's pleasure. And Krishna is very pleased when he sees us chant his name, but we should also be attentive. Not, we're so absorbed in the holy name, we forget what we do, and we knock the kheer off we're flying, Hari Bol, boom! And we knock the kheer off the pot, off the cooker, and the kheer all over the floor. Krishna's mercy, Prabhu. We were chanting his names in ecstasy. It must have been Krishna's arrangement. No way. It's your stupid foolishness. Or you're driving your car. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaur Hari, bang! Krishna's mercy, Prabhu. Not at all. You have to understand things a little bit intelligently. Do the needful. The real offensive is attitude in the heart. That's the worst thing. That's the big block. But we try to do whatever service we can for our purification with all the attention we can give it. That is our sacrifice. That is, you could say, the surrender of the soul. We have faith in the holy name, that if I just try to hear the name, Krishna will arrange. But of course, if you're in emergency or if you happen to be in a situation, which we try to avoid, but sometimes it sounds like you are, when you're chanting your japa, at the same time, you've got a pot of kheer boiling there for the Sunday feast or for the evening program or for guests or whatever it is. What to say? It's not ideal. We should try to focus on japa at the right time. Then we'll get much more effect, and much more change of heart. The heart will change much quicker. Next one. Yeah. Is there any difference between chanting in the temple with devotees and chanting on the streets with devotees to spread the holy name with others? Do you derive the same benefit? Again, it depends on our attitude, really. Chanting in the temple with devotees is congregational chanting also. Chanting in the street with devotees is congregational chanting. The difference being in terms of, you could say, circumstances is different. When you chant on the street with a devotee, other people are hearing. Maybe thousands of people are seeing and hearing the Sankirtan. So for that you get special benefit. At the same time, your mind may be distracted. So that you get less benefit because your mind's distracted. So it may balance out in different ways like this. Or you may be proud of your chanting. I want to lead the kirtan. Listen to me. It depends on one's attitude. Wherever we chant depends on the attitude. Or whatever service we do, depends on the attitude. It's not just the activity of in or out. Real Sankirtan's in the heart, the state of consciousness, when our heart is simply thinking of pleasing the Lord. It takes a while, I imagine, before we come to that platform, but it's a state of purity where it's like Srup Damodar or somebody who sings simply to fulfill the inner heart's desire of Lord Chaitanya. So Sankirtan is really that, is to fulfill the inner desire of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is explained in the Siksastakam prayer what he wants. What is the essence of this movement? It's explained. So Sankirtan is the enactment of this mood. It's not just an activity only, but it's a mood in which we serve, in which we chant. So whether in the temple or out of the temple, but of course, Lord Chaitanya's mood was both. Nighttime he was in Srivas Thakur, Srivas Angan, and going deep into kirtan with his most intimate associates. And in the daytime he's taking out to everyone else and drowning everyone else in that nectar of Sankirtan. So both are important. You may only be able to do one at some times or the other at some times, or you may have more of an attraction for this one or that one, but somehow or another, whatever it is the attitude that counts, to absorb ourselves in the mood of a servant at this stage of the holy name, and just try to be attentive and try not to let this pride and distraction and envy and whatever else may come into the mirror of the mind while we chant the holy name of Krishna. Try to refer back to Krishna all the time and not just have a conditional aspect. Okay, conditional meaning, we're proud of I'm there, they're not, or I'm on Sankirtan, I'm attracting so many people's attention when I wave or when I beat that drum or when my singing or whatever it is, or the way I look at people. All these things can be barriers to pleasing Krishna and thus genuinely engaged in Sankirtan in the first place. We're not really engaged in Sankirtan with that mentality. We're having the opportunity to associate with those who are engaged in Sankirtan, we would hope. But we haven't yet come to that platform of really engaging in Sankirtan, which is wholly and solely for the pleasure of Krishna. So it depends on the attitude. Otherwise, it's a good point. No matter where we are, you can be in the bathroom, you can be in the prison house, you can be in the temple, you can be in the home, you can be on the street, you can be wherever you are, in an aeroplane, wherever it is. Just keep chanting Hare Krishna. Eventually, we hope that something will register in our hearts and will come to our senses one day. We hope so. Hare Krishna. Well, that looks like it for today. And we're hopefully going on Street Sankirtan today. We're lucky here in France. We can go on Street Sankirtan still, even though there were 10,000 cases, so they say yesterday, in France of coronavirus, new ones. Seems like a lot of new cases over here right now. I don't know what it means. Anyway, whatever it is, the government's still not, and still allowing us to go out in the street. We do wear masks and we have to do little social distancing, but we're still as blissful as ever. And time, place, and circumstances, nothing can stop the chanting of the holy names. One can chant in any time, place, or circumstance, and it depends on our attitude. Krishna reciprocates according to our surrender. So it is you could say in one sense, another aspect of that question is a degree of surrender. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So for some of us, it's a surrender to go out and chant on the street. For some of us, it's a surrender to chant in the temple. For some of us, it's a surrender to chant at all. And for all of us, to some degree. Or to chant japa. It's a matter of surrender. Surrender to the will of the Lord. So when we surrender to it, then Krishna will reciprocate accordingly. So surrender. Sharanagati. Surrender. Doing that which is favorable, pleasing to the Lord. Hare Krishna. Okay. Okay, so we're beyond Krishna willing Wednesday, the eve of the World Holy Name Festival. And we'll finish off, if we can, if Krishna allows, Teto Darpana Marchana, and go further into service to the Holy Name and spreading the Holy Name, following the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada all over the world, whether in New Zealand or Fiji, or Australia, Malaysia, Philippines, India, Europe, or America, or Russia, or Africa, or anywhere after that. Everywhere is a good field just chanting the Holy Name. You can always find somewhere to perform pure Nam-Sankirtan. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Bolo Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, whoop whoop, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo, Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo, oh, Haribo, Haribo, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo, Nitai Gaur Haribo, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Go Premanande, Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Harinama Sankirtan ki, Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Siksastakam ki jai, Transcendental Book Distribution ki jai, Ananta Kota Vaishnavinda ki, Namacharya Shri Haridasa Thakur ki
Jai.
Go Premanande.
Hari 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 Bo. Hari Bo. Hari Hari Bo. Hari Bo. Hari Bo. Hari Bo. Hari Bo. Hari Bo.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hari Bol. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj.